Hi guys, welcome to another video. This one is a bit different. It's not a tactical video, although it's quite like one I've made before. This video is about how to start a Space Marine army, and yeah, it's pretty straightforward. So basically, if you're new to the hobby, or you've never played Space Marines before, you're just kind of looking where to start in collecting them, because let's face it, it's a very big range. There is a lot of choice on offer because there's so many different types of armies and factions of the Space Marines. So today I'm just going to cover the loyalist side of things, but you could just as easily apply the rules here to any kind of army really, but let's just go for it then. So first thing to bear in mind is, do you even want to play Space Marines? Do you want to play them as a faction? What I mean is, have you read about the fluff? Have you got a particular chapter in mind, that kind of thing? Do you really like the aesthetic, the visual styles, the models in particular, because that's very important? Do you like what a Space Marine is and that kind of thing? Because if you don't, then you may find them very boring, and even though a lot of people advise to play Space Marines, especially if you're getting into the hobby, chances are if you don't like them, you're not going to enjoy yourself. So really, you should always go for whatever faction you find most interesting, regardless of like perceived power level and that kind of thing. So you should always go for the one you want to play. So if you like Space Marines, then yeah, that's good. Make sure you want to play them. Okay, so Space Marines offer quite a lot to someone who's new to the hobby, and even people who have never played them before. Basically, a Space Marine is the benchmark for what the game revolves around. So in other words, their stats, which are generally 4s across the board, so weapon skill 4, ballistic skill 4, strength and toughness 4, initiative 4, you get the idea. That is pretty good, and of course they all have power armor, so you're always getting that. Well, you're not always getting it, but you're getting a good armor save in the majority of cases. So you've got tough infantry, they've got decent firepower with their bolters. You've got rules that basically keep them in the fight. They don't get swept out of combat, they don't run off the board very often. You actually have quite a lot of options. So what the Space Marines generally offer is this: versatility and basically staying power. They are a very forgiving army in many ways, but in the current game, that's not necessarily enough. You need to basically play them to their strengths, just like any other army, and they will do well for you. So what they offer is versatility. That is the main thing, and resilience. So if that sounds good to you, then this is a good army for you. Okay. Bear in mind that when you're collecting them, they have you're going to have lots of similar armor to paint. Basically, every Space Marine wears armor, apart from Scouts, but even they have some armor. So you're going to be painting the same kind of model quite a lot. So that may get boring. A lot of them have some bling, but bear in mind that you've got to be ready for that. But at the same time, each piece of armour that they have is basically a blank canvas, so you can paint whatever you want on there. You can go nuts with it, especially if you like things like freehand and stuff like that, or you want a simple but effective paint scheme, and the Space Marines really show it off well. So, if that sounds interesting to you, and that's probably pretty good for you. Excuse me. So next thing is, I'm just going to go with how to acquire models, okay? There is a lot of Space Marines out there in the world, in that many people have bought box set starters with them in. They've bought, boxes of them from Games Workshop, left the hobby and never come back, and that kind of thing. There are a lot of Space Marines out there. So acquiring them second hand is probably a very good way of getting a lot of models very cheaply. Now bear in mind, a lot of people start Space Marines, so that means their first time painting a model, their first time assembling a model, that kind of thing. A lot of these Space Marines are going to be in really bad state, so bear that in mind. Now you can strip the paint and that kind of thing. The real problems I find with this are that you tend to get some dodgy loadouts with the weapons. people have given people 2 chainswords, or you know, they've got like a bolter in one hand and a flamer in the other, and it's like, what the hell, you know. If you don't mind a bit of chopping and cutting and that kind of thing, you can easily get extra bits, that kind of thing. It takes a lot more work, but you can get the models very, very cheaply. Having said that, it's not that difficult to get them new either. So you may find, especially for your first unit, that you actually want to buy it new and basically build the models however you actually want them to be built. So there you go. The benefits are it's not hard to get parts for Space Marines. There's so many bits out there. Someone's probably giving some away, or would sell you some very cheap, or swap, or that kind of thing. So, you know, it's not too hard to get the models, but something to bear in mind. Okay, now the actual models you should get. I would say when you are first getting started here with Space Marines, what you want to buy is the Codex and a Tactical Squad, and that will do you for the time being. The Codex especially, because not only does it have all the fluff in, and if you haven't seen that already then you really should, but secondly is that, you know, it's got the rules in. If you're getting the generic Space Marine Codex, then you have 7 different factions in there, which are all very, very effective, for all of which a Tactical Squad is useful. The same thing if you're playing Blood Angels or Space Wolves, you can still use that Tactical Squad box very nicely. Dark Angels is the only Marine army out there where a Tactical Squad isn't that effective compared to the other options. However, a Tactical Squad is still good. So, you know, that Tactical Squad box is always going to be useful, and, you know, you can build them however you like. And of course you can apply them however you want. So if you get that, then at least you can like experiment with them, you know, you can get building with them, and you can paint them up and see if you like it. Because if you don't like it, then you can stop there. You haven't wasted anything, and you can easily offload a tactical box because everybody uses them. So, you know, the other good thing is that Tactical Squad will basically see you fit in every single game you play with that army. You will always find a use for a Tactical Squad. They are one of the best troops choices in the game. So, you know, it's a great place to start. On top of that, you only really need a HQ there, and you've already got a fully functional army, so, you know, it'll be very small, but there you go. Okay, so that's basically it for getting started. If you have got this far, okay, it's time to decide on what kind of faction you want. Now, if you're taking the generic Space Marine Codex for an example, you'll see that basically how you paint your Marines, which kind of founding chapter you start with, or successor chapter you start with, determines the type of rules you will play. Generally, to make an effective army list, these chapter traits are so powerful that you kind of want to build an army list around them. So, for example, if you have Imperial Fists as your chapter, then bolters are effective because you're rerolling 1s when shooting. Also, so are Devastators, because you've got Tank Hunters. So with that in mind, you will probably want some squads of Devastators and lots of bolter troops rather than anything else. Salamanders favour Flamers, but you could also make them favour Melter Guns. So again, go for that. White Scars, Bikes, you know, Raven Guard, Assault Marines and Tactical Squads. But no Scouts. Ultramarines is kind of a mix, you know. You have a lot of different builds in Space Marines, and there are no bad builds. So what you actually build really does depend on the faction you have and how to get the most out of the traits. So if you really can't decide, or maybe you've got a favourite already, that's great. If you can't decide, then there are many, many benefits to either going one of the unknown the unknown chapters from which founding they have, or just create your own chapter. And that's what I did. I was going to do that anyway. Basically, I did that because, as I said before, Space Marines are a blank canvas. I really liked the idea of just coming up with my own colour scheme and logos and history and all that kind of thing, and that's really, really fun. But, you know, making your own chapter can be a lot of fun. But at the same time, it gives you that flexibility. Like, if you still can't decide, you can at least try out a few of them as you're building your army and find which playstyle suits you best. So that's pretty much it for that kind of thing. But yeah, there are some benefits to creating your own chapter. Okay, so along with that, one of the strengths of the Space Marine Codex is there are lots of versatile rules in there to help you create your own characters. So whilst there are a lot of special characters dependent on the faction, you can easily build your own little character up using the relics and the war gear options and that kind of thing very, very well, and they'll be very effective. So for instance, my biker captain Isolde, she is kind of well known now because she is always, you know, loaded out the same way. She's got backstory and history, but not that I like talk about that during the games, but you know, she's got character to the point where people know her name, and you know, they know what she's going to do, and they're worried about her and that kind of thing because she causes problems. She's pretty cool. It adds more fun to the games for a start because, you know, you've got these characters. But at the same time, you know, you've created something yourself, and you know, it's something unique to your army that no one else has. So go for it. You know, do it. It's right there. It's fun to do. Okay. Now, provided we're going on with this, and you are creating your own chapter or something like that, decide on a paint scheme. This is actually one of the tougher parts of creating a chapter, but at the same time, even if you're painting an established chapter or a successor chapter, sometimes they don't have a paint scheme, at which point you'll need to come up with it. Alternatively, you know, you may want to know how to paint them specifically, you know, like, so in those situations there are painting tutorials on YouTube or on the internet in general. You can ask on forums. Bolter and Chainsword is particularly good for Space Marines content. You can use the Bolter and Chainsword Space Marine Painter. Just Google Space Marine Painter and you'll find it. This is pretty good because it lets you plan out colour scheme. And I'm also going to have a video on testing paint schemes very soon in the future, so you can stay tuned for that. But basically, make sure you decide on a paint scheme. Be careful, because this may actually be a deciding factor in which chapter you pick. Certain paint schemes are much, much harder to paint than others. Case in point, White Scars and Imperial Fists. Yellow and white are very hard to make look nice. They will look very streaky unless you take a great amount of time on them. This means basically you're spending at least twice, maybe 3 times as long per model compared to some of the other factions. Ultramarines in particular are very easy to paint, and they look really, really nice, especially if you go in second company like most people do. So, you know, if painting is an issue for you, then that may help you decide anyway. Failing that, then, you know, really think about your paint scheme before you commit, because do you want to be spending tons and tons of time painting white or yellow? You know, it's slow going. With that in mind, paint 1 unit at a time. So start with your tactical squad. If that's too boring for you to get through, then at least you know you've learned. Don't start Space Marines, basically. I say this for anyone collecting an army. It's very easy with Space Marines to end up with more models than you could possibly paint in several years. I'm not even stretching that by any, you know, by any amount. That is truth. That is literally true. The reason for this being second-hand lots, dirt cheap. You know, you pick up some models you want, and you get tons of other models along with that you didn't really want or need. But whatever, they're Space Marines, you'll get around to them eventually. Other than that, they have so many variety in their units that, you know, you want to try out and check. Because of this, you end up buying a lot, and you know, they never get painted because you're still going through other stuff, and there you go. So, you know, unless you're a very, very fast painter, you know, you don't really want to do that. If you paint 1 unit at a time, you'll feel better about the whole army in general. It'll keep you focused, and of course, it means that you never get into that situation where you've basically got this huge pile of unpainted, or maybe horribly painted, horribly assembled, because they're all second-hand models, and, you know, like a handful of units that are your colours. It's very, very disheartening when you have that situation. So really, really try and curb it. But, you know, So yeah, other than that, let's go into the actual tactics then. So let's say you've decided on your chapter, you've decided on your colour scheme, you know what kind of rules you want to play and stuff like that. Again, building a list, I can't really give you a hard and fast way of doing it. Pardon me, because it really does depend on your chapter tactics, what is effective and what isn't. Having said that, even with the completely wrong chapter tactics, a Space Marine army is still very effective. There's very, very few bad armies possible out there. So, you know, basically the trick is to aim for synergy. Make sure you've got the units you need, so make sure you've got enough anti-tank, anti-infantry, something that can at least hold its own in an assault, maybe, maneuverability, you know, the usual stuff for any army. This is basic stuff that you will want. But make sure there's synergy between the units and they'll be a lot more effective. The other thing I would suggest, although not necessarily, but I like to play like the fluff, and what I basically mean is hit hard and hit fast. So anything that increases speed is very good. Things like bikes, drop pods, rhinos, you know, anything like that. Having said that, the opposite is you could go gun line, aim for long range and that kind of thing. Personally, I think a mix is best because they complement each other well. And the other thing is, range is also kind of a hit hard and hit fast thing because it's touching out turn 1 because it's got the range. Generally it's high powered shots, so you're hitting hard. You know, you could do a lot with that, but that's the basic mantra, is because if you do that, you may be outnumbered a lot of the time, but as a result, that evens the odds pretty quickly because you're hitting so hard, and you know, you kind of crippled the enemy squads, and then they really struggle to get past Space Marines because they've got good toughness, you know, they're hard to kill. A 5-man squad of tacticals is very, very hard to shift from an objective. So there you go. There is really no bad army you can make. You can make some armies that are far less effective or lack punch, but if you aim for that synergy, if you basically make sure they have the suitable power to hit hard enough, then and you've got the delivery methods, of course, then yeah, they'll be successful. So one of the good things you can do with Space Marines is basically you can make a list out of any collection of units, and it can at least perform adequately. But you know, you don't want to end up with loads of things you don't want, so you can try proxies. I suggest with your friends, that kind of thing. Generally speaking, they might have some Space Marines they can lend you to try out, or you can just like do some counts as, that kind of thing. Test things out before you buy them. Make sure you know what you want, and you won't end up with loads of pants stuff. So yeah, that's basically it. This video is fairly long, but you know, quite a lot to get through. So hopefully it's been helpful for you. If it has, then remember to click like. Feel free to comment below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible with any questions you have. And finally, remember to subscribe for actual tactical videos and more videos like this in the future.